All right, guys, we are back. It's been a long off season, long hiatus for me, but preseason is days away now, and I feel like it's time for me to put out my season preview little series that I want to do. I want to do 3 videos covering 3 important parts of this upcoming year for the Kings, and this is going to be part 1. And I'm not a big intro guy, so let's just get into it. All right, so in this part of the series, part 1, I want to talk about the finances. The finances in hockey are very important. It's, the hard cap is one of the most differentiating parts of the NHL compared to the other professional leagues in the country, because you got to find ways to handle it, to keep a good team on the ice. Sometimes you got to find some loopholes, and that can get you 2 Stanley Cups, but you got to be on top of it. And so far, I think Rob Blake's done a decent job. We've been a tanking team. We've been shedding a lot of money. This is the first year that we've kind of used that cap space, and I think we used it very wisely. Getting Philip Deneau, I've talked about it before, but I don't think the $5.5 million is in any way an overpayment. I think what he's going to do for this team, especially. So the first thing I want to look at is the dead cap. So the dead cap has been something that's plagued the Kings for the past few seasons, but the future is looking very good for us. So the biggest thing to note is Kovalchuk's buyout is now off the books. That was a pretty big chunk of money. We no longer are obligated to pay it, and that, as you're going to see, is the start of a lot of dead money coming off the books in the next 2 years. So for this season, we're still paying retained salary for Jeff Carter. Last year of his deal, $2.6 million. That's going to get washed away next year. And then Dion Phaneuf last season was making about $4 million in dead cap space after buying him out. That finally has dropped to $1 million. That's going to stay for the next 2 years, but that was a difference of about $3 million that we've picked up this season. So looking better for us. And then obviously Mike Richards, that's not coming off the books for a long time. Keep cashing them checks, Mike Richards. He's a great player. He was a huge part of this team and winning the Stanley Cups. It's, it may be a little annoying that we still have to pay him, but for everything he's done, $900,000, $600,000 a year, whatever, you'll take it. That's the price of cups. Thank you for everything you did, Mike. And I hope that, he gets a decent retirement. I think he's kind of stayed a little off the radar, but, hopefully he's doing well mentally, physically, and maybe we'll see him back sometime in the future. I'd love to see him come back to the Staples Center for a night and be able to give him kind of the sending off that he deserves, because obviously the way he went out was pretty rough, and I think the career that he's had, he deserves a little bit better from the league and us especially. Now we're going to look at the expiring contracts. So these are all guys who either they're UFAs or RFAs, and their contracts are going to be up after this season and either be extended or maybe let go somewhere else. Who knows? The biggest one, and I think the biggest question mark, at least for me, is Dustin Brown. Dustin Brown is a legend. He's a Kings legend, and I cannot see him ever wearing another jersey. Could he? I guess, but he doesn't strike me as a type of player who will go ring chasing in his final seasons. He's done everything there is to do in the NHL and internationally. He's, obviously not a gold medal, but a silver medal as an alternate captain on Team USA. He's won 2 Stanley Cups. He's lifted 2 Stanley Cups as the captain. He's got a statue in front of the stadium. He's a legend. And I think because of that, he's going to retire in a Kings jersey. Obviously, he's older, right? 36 years old. He's slowed down, but he hasn't slowed down that much. I think a lot of non-Kings fans have pointed to the Dustin Brown contract as, one of the big reasons that this team was so bad and why we had to tank. But he's kind of picked his game back up, and on a team that's been pretty bad, he's been one of the most reliable goal scorers the past 3 seasons. I think he definitely has more in the tank. I think after this contract, he could easily sign on for another year or 2 and stay with the Kings. The question just becomes, what's the price going to be? You see a lot of guys like Thornton, like Marlowe, Jason Spezza picking up sub $1 million contracts. Would Dustin Brown do that for the Kings? I don't know. I don't think he has to, but he does seem like the type of player who loves this organization and would be willing to kind of take that vet minimum to help the team out while continuing to be a part of the team and provide both financial help and on ice help. But you know what? He plays well this season, then he could ask for a little bit more. And the Kings, it would be up to them to have to make the decision. I don't think the Kings want to see him go anywhere, just like no fans want to see him go anywhere. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And then also, if Dustin Brown does drop off, if he realizes, I've lost a step, these young kids are coming up, they are going to be the future, he could easily walk away after this contract runs out. And as I mentioned, he's walking out a living legend for the Kings. And, anything can happen. It all kind of depends what happens this year, especially if the team gets better and we really push for the playoffs and we look like a really promising team. Maybe that kind of influences him to stay and to take less money, keep on the team as a veteran presence. We're kind of running out of vets on this team right now. So having a guy like Dustin Brown, who's obviously such a leader in that locker room, is really important for the Kings going forward. All right, so the next people I want to look at are the UFAs, besides Dustin Brown. So first off, we have Andreas Athanasiou. I've been a big Athanasiou, hater. I just don't think he fits on this team. I think he's a luxury player for a really good team to add depth scoring. But, he got $2.7 million from us as an RFA. This is another year for him to have to prove himself. He was a 30-goal scorer once. Can he do it again? This is probably his last chance, I would think. But you know what? Just like how Wagner keeps staying in the lineup, speed is something that teams really want. So I think he's gone this season no matter what. But for him, he's playing for his first UFA contract. Any team can get him, who will want him, and how valuable will he be. Hopefully that means he plays well for us, but I don't know. The next UFAs are now down in the defense, and the two big ones, $3.5 million, $3.3 million for Alex Edler and Olli Maatta. I believe both of these contracts are going to come off the book next year. I like Olli Maatta. I think he's better than what he was last year. It's just he doesn't really have a spot right now on the team. Bringing in Alex Edler, it kind of puts Olli Maatta as the depth defender. Unless there's an injury, I think that you're going to go with the rookies in Bjornfoot and Mikey Anderson in front of him. So again, a contract year for him. The way he played last year, and if he doesn't really get playing time for the Kings this year, it looks like he might go down in what he'll get next year from teams. That wouldn't be good for him. So again, hopefully that's kind of a contract year boost for Olli Maatta. But that obviously depends on if he gets a chance to play. And Alex Edler, I think he's gone next year no matter what. I think this contract was signed just as a 1 year. We need an older mentor to help out, especially Bjornfoot. I think Mikey Anderson's, he plays like a 10-year vet already. I don't think he needs much mentoring. But for Toby Bjornfoot, it's going to be pretty big to have, a fellow Swede and a guy who has a lot of experience to kind of help him out, hopefully loosen him up a little bit. I think that's one of Bjornfoot's problems maybe is just not feeling as comfortable as he can on the ice. But I think it's a 1 year thing. after that, we'll see what happens with Edler. And then the last one's Christian Wolanin, and I just don't see him really breaking the lineup at all. I expect him to do what happened last year and go through waivers and play in the AHL. I just think we have our guys. We have our 6 right now. If there was an injury, I still think Olimata is the better pick. And guys in the minors are going to be Cale Clegg, Strand, Sean Dursey. Those are a couple guys we've seen play. Dursey we haven't yet, but they're going to get the call before Wolanin. So those 3 guys, I think, come off the books. And that's it. And I guess we do have to mention Jonathan Quick. Well, it's not going to be this year. Next year, that $5.8 million is going to come off the books. And that's going to be big because kind of segueing into the RFA section of this video, while I was making the video, Cal Petersen, they re-sign him. They go early on Cal and get the deal done before the season. I think it's probably the better idea. But, my notes for the video, I wanted to talk about Cal and what kind of contract I think we should give him. And it wasn't a $5 million contract just because I'm not sold on Cal yet. And I know some fans are not going to like that, but we just haven't seen him play a full season as a number 1 goalie. This is going to be the year. And so I wanted them to maybe wait a little bit and see if he was playing well. Then you sign him as quick as possible. If he's not playing well, then you maybe get a little bit of a discount keeping him or doing a potential trade or what have you. But the Kings, they go with $5 million for 3 years. I think it's, the money is fine for a starting goalie. It's a little rough next year just because we still will have Jonathan Quick making 5.8, but it's just, is Cal Petersen a number 1 goalie? If he is, $5 million is a really good bridge deal for him. If he becomes what he kind of came into the league as, which was, really good stats. He was making, 38 out of 40 saves regularly in front of a really bad defense. If he can keep that up and get back to that spot, it's a great deal for us. I just wonder if he can do it. And this is going to be the year for him to prove it. He's got the money now, which I don't know, maybe it takes away some of the pressure that guys like, we'll scroll up to Adrien Kempe will have, because for him right now, he doesn't have a deal. He's playing for money this year. He's playing to prove himself to hopefully get a better contract. And with Cal now, we're not going to have that. He's got his money. It's just we need to hope that he can get back to what he broke into the team as and be that really solid number 1 goalie going forward. And as we've mentioned him, let's talk about Adrien Kempe. Adrien Kempe, probably now that Cal signed, he is the biggest RFA that we're going to need to re-sign. I believe the Kings will re-sign Adrien Kempe. I know that he's inconsistent. A lot of fans have kind of given up on him, but he did just turn 25. He's still young-ish, even though he's been with the team for 7 years now. And I think that 7 years has built a very strong tie with the organization. I do believe that they want to get him signed up to a longer contract and keep him. I think they've put in a lot of work and time with him. He's, as much as he's struggled with consistency, he's also proven to every single coach that's come in that he's a very reliable and safe option. A lot of times you'll see whenever there's a new player that comes to the team, they stick Adrien Kempe on his line because he kind of fits with everyone. And I think that's to a detriment for Adrien Kempe, because I'm kind of going into the next episode where I talk about the player's performance this next year, but he really needs stable line. He needs to be with good players. And this is the year to do it, right? I mean, this whole season for everybody on this team, it's a fresh start. We have so many really high ceiling young players in the minors just chomping at the bit to get in. This is our chance, or the players' chance, to make sure that they're not the ones that get cut for them. And Adrien Kempe, it's going to be it's going to be interesting to see what happens to him, because the other thing with Adrien Kempe is he's kind of the only trade bait that the Kings have. If we start to decline, if we look like we're not going to make the playoffs come deadline time, there's not many players on this team that I think would get shipped out. Adrien Kempe is a guy who last year there was interest in him from Toronto. He could be someone that the Kings say, hey, look, he's not, whether he is playing well or not, we don't want to tie our money into him going into, the flushing process of the team to make room for the new guys. So this is a big year for him, player-wise, development-wise, and money-wise, because if he does get extended, what's the price going to be? I look at Alex Iafallo, $4 million. That seems about right for Adrien Kempe, but it depends on how he plays. If he gets top-line minutes, if he works out his consistency problems and kind of reaches that level of play that he really should have with the tools that he has to work with, it could be more than $4 million. He could be making Victor Arvidsson money, even $5 million, something like that. But if he continues to struggle, and the Kings do still feel like they want to keep him, they don't want to move on from him and keep him signed for longer, then it might be under $4 million. It really just depends on how he plays. And I think, like I mentioned with Cal now not having that contract year, I hope that the contract year does kind of motivate Kempe. I don't want to see them re-sign him before. I want to see a fire lit under him, because a lot of the guys on this team for the past 3 years have had a past. We've been a bad team. There wasn't any expectation. This year we have expectation to be a good team. We need to be contending for the playoffs. So, Adrien Kempe needs to take all that pressure and run with it. And if he does, he's going to be a really happy man cashing in on a nice new contract. He loves his nice expensive clothes, so maybe that'll give him a little boost, but it's really going to depend. And I think they didn't want to do it with Cal Petersen. I understand, because goalies are weird and unpredictable. But with a guy like Kempe, I want them to hold off on the RFA. Maybe not until the off season, but keep that fire under him and see what he can do, and just see how much he wants it. Because I think that's one of the reasons that Kempe struggles with consistency is he's not pressured enough. I think I want to see him in a situation where there's real expectations put on him, not as a still young guy on a bad team trying to figure out how to put the tools together. Now he needs to be a top line guy. He needs to score goals for us. He needs to be one of our leaders. I mean, he's been here 7 years. No one else on this team besides 4 guys can say that. So it's time for him to step up, and being a contract year, hopefully we see that. And, I hope that he gets a good paycheck, because that's going to mean that he's putting in goals, he's putting up points, and he's making this team a real contender and a good team in the West again. So after Kempe and Cal Petersen, the RFAs are pretty low risk. They're not key players. The only one that is a key player is Mikey Anderson, and Mikey Anderson right now is one of our best defenders. I think he's very underrated. Maybe not so much by the fans, but definitely outside the NHL. People don't talk about him, but he is a rock in defense, and he's going to get paid for it. He's an RFA, so there's not a lot of bargaining power. But I look at a guy like Sean Walker, and Mikey Anderson's a better player than Sean Walker right now, and he has a higher ceiling. So I think this next contract for Mikey Anderson, we're going to be seeing, I would say, even above Matt Roy. I mean, I think when Mikey Anderson finally gets his contract signed, it's going to show how underpaid Matt Roy is for our benefit as Kings fans and the organization. But $3 million for Matt Roy is a steal, and he's another player that just those defensive-minded defensemen aren't going to get talked about, but that's a really good contract, and I think that's a contract that the Kings are going to try and shoot for and look to when they're in the contract negotiations with Mikey Anderson and his agent. And that's a solid price. I mean, I'm a huge Mikey Anderson fan. I think it comes off, but it's not just his play on the ice, but it's just he's got the intangibles that you look for. He's won so much in his career already, in World Juniors, in the NCAA, two-time NCAA champion. I mean, he's already got such a high pedigree, and he's a guy that the Kings easily are going to lock up. It's just how much money is he going to make? I think the fact that Matt Roy is underpaid helps the Kings, not Mikey Anderson. And again, I mean, it just kind of puts Sean Walker in a weird spot where, he's making almost Matt Roy money, but he's just not a Matt Roy level player. So it's going to be an easy call to sign him. It's just how much money is it going to be? Like I said, I think it's going to be around this $3.1 million, somewhere around $3 million. I think in between Sean Walker and Matt Roy is where it's going to be. But if he does sign that contract, I think Matt Roy and Mikey Anderson are two very undervalued defensemen that's going to really help us out going forward, trying to build this team to be a Stanley Cup contender. After that, there's not much, I mean, Brendan Lemieux, I'm not a big fan of Brendan Lemieux. I think this year he's going to fall out of the lineup. I just think we have too much talent that is NHL ready, that's in the minors right now, for him to kind of keep a place on the team. He's making $1.5 million. He's not playing like a $1.5 million player. At best, he's going to be on our fourth line. I think we just let him walk. That seems pretty obvious. Unless he finds some crazy gear for us, then hey, that's cool. But I think Brendan Lemieux, it was a kind of weird decision to bring him in the first place. And I think, the Kings are going to be happy to let him go after this season. Gabe Vilardi. I forgot about Gabe Vilardi. That's the big what if, because we'll get into Gabe Vilardi here because I really like him. Every Kings fan likes him. I'm just frustrated with him, and it's tough to blame him because he's gone through so much with his back injury and just getting to this point. He's also only 22 years old. He's still super young. It's going to be really interesting to see what he can do this year, because this is the year. He came onto the scene, was amazing for 10 games, had not a full season, but kind of a full season last year. And, there were some good moments, but for the most part, I think you could admit that it was not what we wanted. I think it was a little bit underwhelming. And so he's a guy who, he's going to be coming off the ELC, so he doesn't have much bargaining power, but he is playing for not so much money and a bigger contract, but he's playing for playing time. He needs to establish himself that he is also one of these top prospects. There's a lot of love and a lot of hype around Quentin Byfield, Alex Turcotte, Arthur Kaliev. Gabe Vilardi needs to show Kings fans and show the NHL that, hey, don't forget about me. I was the original wonder kid. I was the original number one prospect. And he needs to do it this year. And, he's a guy I'm going to talk about a lot in the next part of the series when it comes to how guys need to perform this year. But it's going to be an interesting one. I don't think that his next contract is going to be huge. I think it's going to be very similar to, what Adrien Kempe and Alex Iafallo got when their bridge deals were signed, which was around $2 million. It was $6 million for both of them. I think it was just 1 year less for Iafallo. So it'll be around that money. But it's going to be important for him to have a really good year. But like I said, he's only 22. He's not going to go anywhere. So we'll see what he can do. And as much as I'm frustrated with him, I have a lot of love for him. I want him to succeed more than any person on this team, and hopefully he can, and hopefully we're building an organization and group of guys that will help elevate him to be able to reach that level that he can reach. The rest of the guys here, Blake Lizotte, he's a great guy, great kid, but I don't see a future here on the team for him, because we have a guy all the way down here in Anderson Dolan, who I believe is just a better Blake Lizotte. But I think maybe he sticks around. He was a nice story, undrafted, kid out of college. He's done really well, and every year I kind of have the same reaction to Blake Lizotte, where I'm not very excited about him. I don't really think he's going to do all that much, but then he just plays his way into the starting lineup and keeps his spot. So we'll see what happens with Blake Lizotte. Wouldn't be surprised to see him re-sign for a pretty small contract just to stay a part of the team. Carl Grundstrom, he's a guy who there's a lot of talent there, but he struggled a little bit to put it together. Pretty common problem for guys on this team. But this is a year for him where he needs to stay in the starting lineup, because he struggled with that last year. He's a guy who is arbitration eligible, so there is more of you want to play for more money, but it's just, what is Todd McClellan going to give him? He needs playing time, and he doesn't seem to be one of those guys, kind of the polar opposite of Blake Lizotte, where Lizotte always seems to work his way onto the team, and it seems like Carl Grundstrom isn't very good at that. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. I like him. I like what he brings to the team. I think that's the reason why a guy like Brendan Lemieux is kind of redundant, because this is the new school NHL. You don't need an enforcer on your team. But Grundstrom is a guy who he'll go and he'll battle in the dirty areas. He throws some nice hits. He's just a solid player to have, especially at the contract that, if he is going to re-sign, will give him, which would be around this 800,000, 700,000 mark. And then now we're going to move on to the prospects. So there's a lot of guys on here who I think should be in the NHL. I think will be in the NHL at some point in the season, if not in the opening day. And there's quite a few expirations coming up. So let's talk about that right now. So I'm going to start with the most interesting one, in my opinion, and that's Lias Anderson. Lias Anderson, I am a huge Lias Anderson fan. I know I said that out of everybody on the team, I want Vilardi to succeed the most. I think I want Lias to succeed even more, because I've liked him from day one. He's been a very controversial player everywhere he's gone, but since he's joined the Kings, I have loved what I've seen from him. He got kind of the short end of the stick for most of the year until they really gave him a nice run of games. He had really good chemistry with Gabe Vilardi at the end of the season, and I think we started to see just how much skill Lias Anderson has. So this is a really big year for him. I think he will get a good run on the top team, hopefully in the middle six. He spent quite a bit of the games last year as a fourth line guy on the wing. I think he built pretty good chemistry with Vilardi, and Lias Anderson is a center. That's what he's played his whole life. So maybe you move Lias Anderson to the center, take on a little bit more of that defensive responsibility instead of Gabe Vilardi, save Gabe Vilardi's back a little bit. Gabe Vilardi kind of struggles with endurance and stamina. So I think that would be a pretty good switch, and that would give Lias Anderson kind of a more important role, being a center on, let's say, the third line. I think that's a really good spot for him. And it would lead to him getting a nice RFA contract. I definitely don't want to see the Kings give up on him. I don't think they will. He's got too much talent to give up on, and as controversial as he's been in his career, since he's came to the Kings, he's been nothing but great with everything. So it's going to be a big year for Lias Anderson. It's a lot of it is going to be on his shoulders. Some of it's just going to be on Todd McClellan. Does McClellan give him a run? But he's a guy who I definitely want them to re-sign. I think they will. And, what would he re-sign for? Bridge deal money, something similar to Vilardi, in the $2 million range, like we saw with Kempe and Iafallo. I think that would be good. The biggest wild card is Vladimir Tkatchyov. Hasn't played a game in the NHL yet. I don't know if he's going to crack the starting lineup or not, or start in the AHL, but he's a Russian from the KHL. Who knows with those guys? I mean, he could come out and be a star for us, or he could be Nikolai Prohorkin 2.0. It's just up in the air. No one knows, and we'll see what happens. I'm not. I think he's a guy who you just cannot put any, you can't put any faith into, I guess. You don't want to rely on Tkatchyov being a star. It's just, hey, if he can come over and perform like he did in the KHL, great. We just got a really good player to add to the lineup. He's a high skill guy, so it's kind of hit or miss with that. He's not going to be a guy who you're going to stick on the fourth line and be a grinder. So it's all up to him. We'll see what happens. He's 25 years old, so he should be in the NHL. I think if he starts in the AHL, it's going to be really tough for him to ever crack the NHL after that, because there's a lot of guys here who are a lot younger, and we've put real capital into, whether it be draft picks or development time, that I think the team wants to give a shot over a guy from Russia. Jared Anderson-Dolan is kind of the last one that I'll talk about, because, well, for the forwards at least, because he needs to step up a little bit. I think that Anderson-Dolan is a much better player than Blake Lias. At least he has a much higher ceiling. But there was times last year where he was, getting demoted, and Lias was leapfrogging him. So this is a contract year for him. I think no matter how well he plays, he's really just a fourth line center, maybe a third line center, penalty killer guy. But, it's a big year for him to just kind of usurp Lias, because, it's not a super high bar, and it's something that by now at 22 years old, he should be there. Martin Frk is another guy. It's tough with Frk just because of the injuries. He definitely has something that nobody else in the NHL has in that slap shot. It just doesn't, there's not a lot else. And even when he came to the Kings, it wasn't like he came and was playing in the NHL and lighting it up. So depending on the injury, maybe he comes back, but I just see Martin Frk being part of the past. When we look at the defense, a lot of names here. Moverar, he's been in Sweden for a long time. He's finally here in the AHL now. We'll see what happens with him. He'll be an interesting player to watch. He's been part of the organization for a long time, so who knows what will happen with him. Dursey, we traded for him in the Jake Muzzin deal. It's been a year plus where he's been in the minors. Like I mentioned when I was talking about, Wolanin kind of being the eighth defenseman, a guy like Sean Dursey, this is his year to hopefully get some time in the NHL, play a couple games, see what he's made of. And then Cale Clague, a huge year for Cale Clague, because what's going to happen with him? There was a lot of talk that maybe Seattle would draft him. They didn't. They went with Curtis McDermott. But, it's a big year for him. He needs to really try and crack the NHL, because he's, like a lot of guys, he's been kind of talked about as, oh yeah, he's going to be a good prospect, and he's been in the minors for a little while now. We just haven't seen him make that jump, and I think this year is kind of his last year. He needs to make the jump, or he's just going to end up one of those, highly touted guys that stays in the minors for the rest of his career. So hopefully we see Cale Clague play some more in the NHL, and hopefully he can kind of figure that game out. So there we go. That is the finances taken care of. A nice little snapshot of where the team is at right now, how we might look going forward. kind of in the front office area of the team. In the next part of this little preview, we're going to talk about the on-ice components going forward. So all the players, how they're going to play, what they need to do to kind of secure themselves on this team, and most importantly, raise us to a playoff team once again. Drew Doughty came out making a statement saying that we are a playoff team. I believe him. Hopefully the guys in the locker room believe him, and that will spur us on into this next season and make this a little bit, happier of a time, and make Kings fans and these videos a lot happier. And if you want to be a part of that, definitely subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, definitely give it a like, comment on what you think. I definitely am interested to hear what people think of Cal Petersen's new deal. $5 million for a guy who hasn't had a full season as a starter. Let me know. So thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for the next part of this series coming out very shortly.